Good evening. Well, we want to say thank you for your love and your support, especially during these past few weeks. David's parents live in Goldsboro, North Carolina. Of course, they were veteran missionaries to Brazil, and they started the work in the city where we now are. Our son Andrew went to their house on Christmas Day and helped them cook Christmas meal. They lived alone. Mom Aycock was 87, and Dad Aycock would have been 90 on April 1st. His birthday was on April Fool's Day, so he almost made it to 90. A week after Christmas, so it'd been New Year's Day, both of them fell at some point during the day in different parts of the house, and they weren't able to get up. And so it was only several hours later that they were found. And so since that day, they rapidly declined in health. And being so far away, you when do I go? What do I do? So David, he finally come to the point, I need to go. So David arrived, I don't remember dates, but David arrived on a Tuesday, and he was able to spend a week with his parents there. Of course, they were in a hospice-type facility by that point, but he was able to visit with them and be with them and talk to them. A week later, Dad Aycock passed away on a Tuesday, and so Wednesday morning, I got a phone call. I was in Brazil, and David said, "Can you come?" I'm sorry. He said, "I know it's just for a moment, but I'd like to have you here for that moment." And so I said, "Okay." So on Wednesday morning, I got my passport and my pajamas, and basically that's all, and came to America and got here on Thursday. And Dad Aycock's funeral was for Friday. So we were able to have his funeral on Friday night. And they weren't able to bury him quickly because at the cemetery, there was several waiting, and so he was pushed back a while. After the funeral, we all went to the hospice facility where Mom Aycock still was, and we sang to her. We sang for an hour or two. We sang hymns, and what I thought was pretty neat was, of course, we don't sing hymns in English, so it was hymns that I probably hadn't sung in 20 years, but without books, we were just there just singing away. So it's important what you put in your mind and your heart, because that's what's going to last. And it was interesting how those words just kept coming up to all those hymns. And I suggested, I said, let's sing a hymn in Portuguese. And so we started, and we couldn't even make it through the first verse because that's not the language of my heart. And so I wasn't able to call it up without words. So we sang, and we visited with Mom Aycock, and we went home. A family friend who is a doctor stayed with her that night. And at 7 o'clock the next morning, we got a phone call that Mom Aycock had passed away. So 87 hours was the time between when they went to heaven. Someone had said that for all these years, Mom Aycock would stay home watching the children and keeping the house while Dad Aycock was out traveling and going as a missionary, and she would be there waiting for him to come home. But this time, it was Dad Aycock that went first, and he was there waiting for Mom Aycock to come home. So 87 hours later, she joined him in heaven. So since Dad Aycock had not yet been buried, for Mom Aycock's viewing, we brought him back in. So they were together there for the viewing with open caskets, and then they were both there together at her funeral, and then they were buried together. And so somehow the Lord worked all that out for them to go to heaven so closely together. But we're thankful for God's sustaining grace, and even though it's been a difficult time. So my prayer request would be, if you could please continue to pray for David. He's going to try to work really hard this week to finish up all the things that needs to be done, and we hope to be able to go back to Brazil next Monday, not tomorrow, but the next Monday, we hope, somewhere around there. So please pray for him, that the Lord would continue to give him strength for this coming week especially, and the weeks ahead. And during Dad Aycock's funeral, he talked about how, we're in Brazil on the battlefield, and it was every week he would have a conversation with his dad about our ministry and what was going on, and who he's doing Bible studies with, and who he wanted on the prayer list to pray for their salvation. And so Dad Aycock, was the one that here had his hands lifted so that the battle could continue in Brazil. And so now, who's going to be the one to hold up their hands so that we can continue the battle? And so we would just like to ask you to fill in that gap. I really appreciated the message this morning. Occupy till I come. We want to be faithful in the place that God has put us, to occupy that place, to make a difference. And, when I looked around this morning at over 200 people here in this sanctuary, I just thought, if each of you would occupy your place well, do your very best to give all you have to Jesus, to make a difference in this church, to make a difference in your community, and to make a difference in the place where God has put you to work, to go to school. If you occupy well, imagine the difference that you can make in this part of your world. And we want to be faithful in Brazil to occupy well till Jesus comes. And those 7 that weren't mentioned, I can guarantee you, even though they weren't mentioned, they stood before their master and they gave account to how well they occupied. And each one of us is going to stand before Jesus. And each one of us is going to give an account to how well we occupied. And so may we all be found faithful.